Your outlook matters, and you have the power to control it. What we allow ourselves to think about, worry about, wish for, or focus on has a significant impact on our well-being and ultimately the well-being of those around us. One of the key components to a positive outlook is gratitude. You see, gratitude leads to happiness and to positive emotions. Finding the good and being grateful for the blessings in your life will help you better deal with adversity. Take 30 seconds and write down everything for which you're grateful. A job, sunshine, food on the table, everything, big, small, and in between. I'll bet your list is long. And every day, take a moment and add 2 or 3 more things to your list. You'll be happier. Trust me. The Bible says, rejoice always, pray continually, and give thanks in all circumstances. For this is God's will for you. Be safe, be healthy. That's creation life.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to day 7. It is day 7 of our 8-day series on taking our first steps toward better health. And I hope that you have been able to make some time to take some better steps, take some healthy steps in your life. We have been looking at creation as the acronym representing each of the 8 components for these 8 days. C is choice, rest, environment, activity, trust in God, interpersonal relationships, and today we are on outlook. The video we just watched talked about gratitude, and there are certainly other aspects too of outlook. And so I'm happy that we get to discuss that tonight. And I'm happy that we get to do that because I have had quite the crazy afternoon slash evening, not what I anticipated, not coming to this moment with all that I thought I would be able to. And so I am challenged right now by this topic of outlook. And so it's good for me. And I know it'll be good for you too, no matter what your outlook may be today. Because the reality of outlook is that it's not just about me, it's about us, right? It's not just about you, it's about those that you live with, those you work with, those you connect with day to day. It has such huge ripple effects. So we're going to talk about that tonight. Reminder to you, if you're watching, be sure to comment. You can just say, "Hey, I'm here, it's so and so." Or since outlook is our topic for today, you can actually put your outlook in the comments. Maybe your outlook is sunshine, and so you'll just put sunshine down there. Maybe your outlook feels like clouds, so just put the word clouds there. Maybe your outlook is kind of meh. So I don't know a visual for meh, so maybe put meh in the comments. So whatever it may be, why don't you help me know that you're here by recording your outlook so that we can all be aware of it and so that we can encourage each other too. I was talking with my girls about encouragement, excuse me, at supper time, and I asked them, "Do you have friends who encourage you?" And first I had to define what encourage means. And then they were just kind of like, "I don't know." So, since you know, because you're an adult, um, may this encourage you and may this be an encouragement to others. Let me introduce our guest for tonight because we do have a guest, and his name is Nicholas Zork. He is a singer, songwriter, a music director, and collaborative artist. His songs, writing, teaching, and music practices explore ways that music can resonate, embody meaning, cultivate diverse and inclusive communities. He also serves as Minister for Worship and the Arts at Church of the Advent Hope in New York. And so, without further ado, I want to welcome Nicholas to our evening focused on Outlook. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, good to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I want to start with maybe what's your word regarding your outlook tonight? If you could put it in one word, maybe a visual picture of some sort, what would your word be?
Well, you were you were saying there was no visual from meh, but I think I feel like maybe there is a meh emoji,
Okay. Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
I think so. I think there's like a movie about it that um I'm not sure if I should be proud that I let my kids watch it. I have a 5 and 7-year-old, but no, it's fine. Yeah, when you said meh, I thought, I'm the opposite of meh.
Okay.
Um, but sort of like the opposite in that I certainly feel I sort of thought wouldn't feeling mad be nice? Wouldn't kind of I think what I feel is a lot of things at the same time, and I'm not sure if that
Okay.
adds up to meh. You blend all the
Yeah.
colors and they make brown.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
meh is almost maybe the absence of all the colors, and I certainly don't feel that way. But I feel very excited about that. In some parts of the world, we're emerging out of this pandemic. There's
Mm.
anxiety about things, so I feel it's complicated an outlook.
Mhm.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
think I have many feelings at the same time, whatever that is.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. Just bring all the visuals together. It's fair.
Yeah, yeah. It's a mashup. It's an emoji mashup. That's what
There
I'm
you go.
feeling right now. And a party of emojis. Everyone was invited. Some I
Oh,
wish
I
weren't
like
invited,
that. I
but
like
they're
that.
there.
A party of emojis. Hallelujah. Um, how would you, if I were to talk to somebody that is very close to you, maybe your wife, best friend, whomever, and I were to ask them about your outlook? Well, no, let me do this differently actually. Not someone who's close to you. Let's talk about someone who maybe you interact with regularly, but you're not necessarily close. What do you think? How do you think they would like rate, not rate, but what? How do they think they would How do you think they would describe your outlook?
Yeah, I think that both those who don't know me that well but know me, and those who know me very well would describe my outlook in similar terms,
Oh yeah.
with a key difference. I think that people that who you just described would probably say that I'm very optimistic. I'm um, I tend to think through scenarios until I come up with one that I feel is a reasonably good one, and then I kind of put my hope and faith in that's what's going to happen. I
Hmm.
think those closer to me might call me pathologically optimistic. So I think it's just is the glass half full or is it half empty? You know,
Yeah.
there's different ways of looking at the same thing. I, what so like when I was 3 years old, I was playing Chutes and Ladders with my mom, and I hit the chute at the top. You're familiar with this game?
Hmm.
This game that teaches young children that life is nothing but a series of you know misfortune that you can do nothing about. Anyways, I was crying because I hit the chute at the top, and my mom said, "Nick, it's just a game of luck." And I looked at her, and in all seriousness, said, "No, mommy, it's a game of hope." And that's pretty much my personality. But you see that depending on the circumstance,
Yeah.
that type of dogged optimism may not actually be warranted. So
I think that's awesome. Um, and from a story I remember you telling of one of your children, it sounds as though that sort of a well, like that sort of a thoughtful reply at a young age may kind of run through your bloodlines there a little bit.
yeah,
Would you?
my toddlers are very philosophical in different ways.
Yeah.
My one toddler is very observant. Her sister said 4 or 5-year-old sister said to my 3-year-old at the time, "Do you want to go to space?" And she looked at her and she's like, "Ava, we're already in space." So that's like her philosophy. But the other one's like more in the hypothetical world.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'll say this, maybe it'll be relevant later. She lost her little stuffed puppy, and she said, "Am I going to miss
Mm.
the puppy when I'm older?" And as any good parent, I lied and said, "No, you'll only have good memories." Again, the pathological optimism. And she said, "But Daddy, good memories are sad memories when you love someone and they're not there."
Oh, mercy.
And then I said, "I'm never going to lie to you again. You can handle the truth. I'm sorry for trying to put a positive spin on things." So yeah,
Oh
I
man.
think optimism with truth is what I like. A truthful, honest
Mhm.
optimism is what I aspire to. But sometimes I might, you know, sugarcoat things a little. But my kids are
Yeah.
teaching me that doesn't really work. Actually, the
Hey,
sugar-coated optimism doesn't work.
when have you found that your optimism, um, maybe a work scenario or um, when have you found that your optimism is sort of what was necessary at that moment, and but was missing. Like maybe others weren't able to be in that space, um, and you were able to, yeah, to kind of bridge the gap, so to speak.
I'm not sure if I have a particular example that's especially illustrative at this point, but I think pretty consistently, and this could be a good thing or a frustration, I'm pretty stubborn in believing that things are possible. So,
Mm,
if folks say, I don't know, I think it's not going to work out. Um, I try to be collaborative and take their wisdom seriously. Um, but in my mind, at least, I kind of won't give up on something, even if the odds are long. I'll really believe that it's possible. If it's worth it, and that I'll keep pushing for that. So I guess being sort of very stubborn in my belief in what's possible, I think can
mhm,
be helpful.
mhm,
Um, but I think everybody needs a different recipe. I was going to say medicine, but I don't know if I want to. I don't. I'm not a health professional, so I don't have any business talking in medical terms. But you know, um, maybe I should have a musical metaphor. But I like food, so I think everybody needs a different instructions on the recipe card. For
mhm,
them to kind of get in the right headspace uh, to proceed living their life. We can't predict the future, but for me, my default position is to be pretty optimistic. The challenge with that is that things don't go as planned much of the time.
mhm.
So I actually find, oddly, that my optimism is helpful to other people that I'm collaborating with. And
Okay.
I don't want to call it realism, but their willingness to be very open to all the things that could go wrong is very
Mhm.
helpful to me. So there's
Okay.
sort of their willingness to say, yeah, but nine out of 10 times, this is probably going to happen. So we should be ready for that too. I find that
Mhm,
helpful.
mhm.
And I think people tend to find my focus or fixation on the one way it could go right as encouraging, like, hey, but it's possible.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think we need there are different ways to get to there are different ways to move forward. You don't
Mhm,
have to
mhm.
be Pollyanna, and you don't have to be sort of a radical realist. I think it's a combination of a lot of things.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. It reminds me of one point during my earlier on in my work life when I remember, and I don't know where I got this concept from, but I remember thinking, I'm never going to be that person who wakes up in the morning and is like, I love my job. I can't wait to get to work. And I was just like, I don't know who those people are, but that's never going to be me. And I was fixated, even though I had declared to myself that that's not going to be me. I wasn't okay with that. Right? I wasn't okay with having a different recipe, so to speak. I was still fixated on what seemed to me to be this ideal of this visual of this super optimistic person who wakes up ready to roll all the time, is always on and refreshed, and and it took me a while, and finally, thankfully, I got to the point where I realized, hey, i I misread that whole thing. And I need to learn to see what it is about me and how I function that works, and I need to find value in that. Um, do you find, or do you think that um, that people seek after being more optimistic, or do you find that people are maybe afraid of optimism because they've thought of all that could happen? Um, how do you think
Yeah.
people are where that's concerned?
Well, I mean, I can speak from personal experience. I think that we all have different strengths, and we all have different things that are not our sort of go-to
Mhm,
way of being. And I
mhm,
think that we do well to work with others who will kind of remind us of um, what's possible. But I enjoy the realists in my life, and I
mhm,
think that they enjoy my borderline Pollyanna attitude sometimes. But I'll give you an example. I guess I'm just saying we need different things. And for me, actually being pessimistic is really motivating. And I'll tell you what, this will make more sense with a really specific example. When I was writing my dissertation, which, if any of you out there are thinking, you know what, I think that I might want to do a PhD, you'll want to be feeling stronger about it than might want to do a PhD, because it's a pretty terrible process of writing a long book that, unless you're very fortunate, no one will ever read. I'm really glad that I did it. But the way that I had to motivate myself to actually begin writing chapters of this 200 and some odd page, tome, my mantra, believe it or not, was every morning I would wake up and I would say, this is going to be terrible. And then I would write. Now, that might sound ridiculous to you, but for me, I was so attached to the idea that it needed to be awesome, that it needed to be an awesome experience, that I needed to feel inspired. I needed to be in the flow state from page one, that I felt like I couldn't work unless that I needed to feel a certain way to work. So for me, just accepting, not the entire time, but accepting that at some point over the next 5 hours, I'm going to feel terrified, disappointed in myself, uncertain, things that I don't want to feel, I'm going to feel. I just accepted that up front. And then once I lowered the bar to, I'm going to write pages, even if I'm not having fun, then I was able to do it. Other people need the opposite pep talk. Other people need someone to tell them, or they need to tell themselves, there's a really old Saturday Night Live skit, Stuart Smalley, I think, where he's like, looks in the mirror and he goes, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and doggone it, you can do it. Some people need that. Like for me, I wake up feeling kind of optimistic in the morning, and I need to say, hey, it's okay if actually you feel pretty terrible for the next 2 hours, because you're going to get the pages done. So I think being open to, I think it's actually a different kind of optimism. There's one that says, I'm going to feel a certain way. I'm going to think that this is brilliant when I'm done with it. That's one. There's another one that says, you know what? Even if this is really hard, I can keep going. I can learn from my mistakes. And it's that kind of positive outlook that I've been working on developing. The other situational one, or the just believing I think I can do it somehow, or I think I have the ability to do it. That is something that was sort of inculcated in me by my very loving, affirming parents. But like, I can handle doing it poorly is a different kind of positive outlook. And in life, I do things poorly all the time. Learning that I can handle that was what I needed to develop. And I guess I would say that's not really pessimism. It's just being optimistic about something different in an honest way. I'll get through the failure, which will happen, has happened a lot.
Yeah. Is that something you sort of just picked up over time, learned to do? How do you feel you've kind of grown to that point?
I would say that I avoided it for a very long time. So I don't know that it happened so much over time. I think I did a lot of self-reflection after my children were born several years ago. I would credit therapy. I would credit a lot of things. I would credit a couple books I've read that for whatever reason just clicked with me. There's a really interesting book, and this is, again, for me, this isn't something maybe that's universally helpful. There's a book called The Antidote by Oliver Berkman. And he sort of espouses, I can't remember the subtitle, but it's basically, he said it's for people that can't stand positive thinking. That's not how I took it. I love positive thinking. It's for people who are sort of have run out of the utility of positive thinking. And he talks about a really wild experiment where he just embarrassed himself on purpose on a train by calling out the stations, and he said he felt invincible by like station 7 when he realized that like nobody cared, nobody was paying attention to him. And so what if they thought that he'd lost his mind? The one other example from that book, I think, is a great illustration of what I'm talking about. A really famous psychologist, one of the founders of cognitive behavioral psychology, I believe it's called, Albert Ellis. Albert Ellis Institute is here in Manhattan, not far from where I'm talking to you right now. He was really nervous talking to people. In particular, he wanted to be able to have a conversation with young ladies, and he was nervous about it. So what he did is he committed to going and sitting in Central Park every day and talking to a young lady. This for him was going to be a great challenge. He did this, and after 3 months, only 3 people reciprocated his interest, and they lined up dates, and only one of those 3 showed up. So what he learned after this was not that, in fact, he was a Casanova and didn't know it. What he learned was that he could handle rejection.
Mm.
And I think that, some people need someone to believe that they can do things they don't think they can do. But I think we all need help believing in ourselves. Um, and but there are different things we don't believe in. And I think just for me, I sort of thought, you know what, if I fail miserably and get rejected, I won't handle that well. So what I've had to learn is, well, actually, I don't enjoy it, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to do that is to go ahead and do things that are a little bit difficult and painful and lead to rejection. And then you learn you can handle it, which is different from learning that, you know, you're amazing at something.
Right.
Well,
Right.
it's you're learning that you're resilient, which is different from learning that you're, great at the task itself. And it might almost, for me, it was more important to learn that I could handle just messing up a lot, because as a human
Mm-hmm.
being, I do that. So
Mm-hmm.
that has given me a positive outlook that I didn't necessarily have growing up. And I'm not, I think I had great parents, and I think it's better to have parents that believe in you to the degree that you are maybe not comfortable with failure than the other way around. But we all need to get comfortable, not comfortable. We all need to accept that life doesn't go as planned, and we can make it through those times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because eventually they will happen. Yeah, so that book was really important, really helpful to me. The other one, I won't talk about it at length, but it's called Rethinking Positive Thinking, I think is the title, by NYU professor Gabrielle Oettingen, I believe is how you pronounce her last name. And she talks about a concept called mental contrasting, where you kind of think in advance about the things that could go wrong. So my tendency is to think about all the ways in which things could go right. That could be helpful, because you can come, if you're really stubborn about it, you can come up with ways things could go right that you hadn't thought of, or that somebody else
Mm-hmm.
hadn't thought of.
Mm-hmm.
But planning in advance, well, what am I going to do when things go wrong, is also really, really helpful. And the one example of that was, I was going into a really important songwriting session, important for me, an artist I was excited to be working with. And I just did this mental contrasting. I thought, okay, well, what's going to go wrong? And I thought, at some point we're going to get far enough, and I'm going to think, you know what, we've done good for today. We'll hit kind of a wall, and we'll be tempted to stop. And I assumed that would probably happen, because it usually does. Sometimes the song falls out and you're just like, wow, I can't believe how brilliantly this is going. But usually you hit a wall at some point. I thought through the negative thing, if you will. And I said, when that happens, I'm going to say, let's just finish a bad draft. And sure enough, that happened. And I literally said, because I'd thought through the negative possibility, I said, you know what, let's finish a bad draft. Well, by the end of the bad draft, it actually ended up being great. But even if it hadn't been great, it's easier to edit something that's finished later. There's just lots of reasons to be willing to countenance things not going the way we want to, so that we can make a plan for what we'll do when they don't. And I think that's another positive way to look forward, weirdly, thinking
Yeah.
about things that are not.
Yeah. And I initially, when you talked about thinking of what could go wrong, it made me think of what happens to those of us that wrestle with anxiety. Like, we think about all things that can go wrong, but the difference in what you were speaking of is you think of the things that go wrong, and then you think of what your next step will be in light of those possibilities. And that is key. That is such a golden next step. Without that next step, you just sort of live in the anxious state instead, and in the state of impossibility. Um, as we reflect on this pandemic and outlook, for many, if not all of us, our outlook has been kind of all over the place. How how did you find yourselves? I mean, I'm not pretending that the pandemic is over, but I feel like maybe the worst of it is behind us. So that's why I'm speaking kind of in the past tense. How did you find yourself? Um, how did you find your outlook, or like working through your outlook or um, during the early stages of this pandemic? What did you do to care for your mental health? Because that's a foundational piece of this whole conversation is our mental health. How did you what did you do in order to care for your mental health during this pandemic?
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer for that. I'm not sure that I would do it the same if I could do it all over again. But I think I did the only thing that I could do, which was focus on what was immediately in front of me. I mean, I live with a frontline worker, and so
Hmm.
she was getting up every day and walking toward the epicenter of the virus. A
Wow.
hospital in Washington Heights,
Yeah.
in New York City. Where they were going to be moving COVID patients to her floor, and her floor wasn't set up for it. And I mean, every imaginable stressful thing she was dealing with very directly.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, in moments like that, thinking about 5-10 years from now, it's obviously not the best use of your mental energy. So I guess it sort of oddly brought me into the present and into the now,
Yeah.
because with I think part of the reason, this is pretty speculative, but I think part of the reason why uncertainty bothers us so much, and for me, it's closely connected to certain anxieties, is because we feel like it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
That certainly this uncertainty should be, resolvable, and we could be certain. During the pandemic, it was pretty evident that there was nothing we could do about the uncertainty. We didn't know what was going to happen.
Hmm.
And so I think it just forced me to be present with my kids, to be, to enjoy a meal when we could, to, focus on the good I could do, small though it may have been, at times, to try to be helpful. We, I'm here in the church building where I work. We didn't have the staff, or we weren't really set up to do really high tech productions in terms of creating edited videos. We just figured, what we can do is just literally call everybody personally just to check in. It's a small thing, but yeah, it just sort of forced me to. I had to think smaller, and that was actually
Hmm.
helpful, because it's
Hmm.
easy to get lost in the big picture and
Yeah.
not take the really positive steps that you can take right now.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think I didn't have a choice but to do that, because I really didn't. I didn't have a handle on the big picture, what was going to happen.
Right.
Um, so I'm not saying I handled it perfectly, but to the degree that I focused on the next positive step, I think that, you know we were fortunate too. We didn't suffer loss in our family. We were able to keep our jobs, so we were really privileged. I need that needs to be said. But there was lots of stress and anxiety, and I think just doing the best thing you could do next was the to the degree that I handled it well. That was what I did. When I did start
Hmm.
thinking about down the road, boy, then thinking about things I can't do anything about, not helpful.
Not helpful.
Um, Not helpful. And when you're not in a pandemic, sometimes you can kind of convince yourself that you do, in fact, know the future and it's going to be awesome. During this pandemic, that was impossible too. So I kind of had no choice but to be a little more grounded, and that was positive for me.
Hmm. Hmm. Do you feel like there are parts of that grounding, that focusing on the small pieces that you want to hold on to moving forward?
Yeah, I think that I'm going to have to. I would suggest that probably we all need to. Um, Even if the outlook for, let's say, global affairs, um, you know, racial justice, economic equality, all these challenges that we
Hmm.
face, or racial injustice, even if the outlook were it's going to keep getting better and better and better, which I'm not sure that is the outlook,
Right.
um, it wouldn't be covered that way by our news media, which, I mean, the business model is clicks, and terrifying things get clicks. My friend used to work in an online production company, and he said, really, the only things that go viral are funny or some stuff that makes you mad. And I think these days it's often mad. So,
Yeah.
I don't know that we're going to get a lot of support for feeling really great about the future of our democracy here in America, or the future of, uh, you know, public health around the world or international affairs. So, and I think that there's reason to be really concerned about all the things that are being covered, even if they are being covered in a sensationalistic way sometimes. So
Yeah.
I think I'm going to need to keep leaning into to being grounded. And I'm glad I got a little practice doing that during the pandemic, because I think just doing the next best thing we can do for the good of our families, for our broader communities, our nations, and our large communities. That's it's not that we ignore the big picture, but we have to focus also on what we can actually do something about. And that's really
Yeah.
rewarding, even if it doesn't resolve everything in our minds. That's as
Right.
rewarding as it gets, I feel like sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so easy to want to be part of and want to fix the larger things. They sometimes like being part of a task force that works on something large can feel more gratifying, can feel make you feel like you're doing something more significant, um, and can become like our focal point for our next thing, and then we miss out on so much, whether it's our family, our neighbors, the things that are right in front of us. It's
Yeah,
and granted, not everyone loves being involved in big things. I shouldn't speak for everyone, but some of us,
right.
you
Yeah.
know, and it can just serve as a greater stressor, um, that way. So yeah, I
Well, if we have
resonate.
to know, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. Go ahead.
I mean, if we have to know that everything's going to be awesome, then it's going to be stressful because, I find that I'm delusionally optimistic enough to like think that things could be awesome, but I'm not quite good enough at lying to myself to believe that they definitely will be. So, I think in many ways my optimism is a defense mechanism from the fact that I am sort of painfully aware of lots of things that could go wrong. And I think I used to be, I'm sure I still am. I was sort of and am sort of still attached to certain narratives like that
Mm,
our nation will keep improving, that things are going to get better. Even if it's slow, it's going to keep getting better. Our church is just going to keep getting better. I don't know. If I have to be sure that progress is inevitable, then I think I will be very discouraged. I think that the only thing we can ensure is the next step.
mhm,
Um, I guess I will say ultimately, I believe, Dr. King says that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. I think it's a lot longer than I would like it to be most of the time. So I'm not sure that scenario thinking about how awesome things are going to be in the future is necessarily healthy. I think having hope is essential for justice. I think critic Scott King says something like that. Absolutely. But how exactly things will come to fruition, we can't always know. And that's
mhm.
not a necessary prerequisite for doing the next good thing that we can do.
Right, right. One last question for you, Nick. So we've been looking at creation. And I'll put this up on the screen here, and I'd love for you to talk about how you believe your outlook, excuse me, has been able to benefit one or two of these other areas of our health. So we've got choice, which is basically boils down to we have the freedom to choose. Right? God has given that to us. Even those of us who may not feel as though we have much, still have the ability to make choices, to some degree in our lives. So C is choice, R is rest. Excuse me, rest as in, I mean, for those of us who are Seventh Day Adventists, there's the Sabbath component of rest. Um, Rest as in, being able to care for your body. The guest we had on when we talked about rest talked about rest as restoration. E is environment, and not just, do you recycle or global warming or something like that, but what are the environments that we're creating intentionally for ourselves to exist within. A is activity, whether it's exercise or mental activity. T is trust in God, and I is interpersonal relationships. And one of the striking facts about interpersonal relationships is that quality interpersonal relationships can actually help us to or lower the possibility of all sorts of health crisis stuff like heart disease, et cetera, et cetera. And then N is nutrition, what we're feeding our bodies. So how looking at these different things, and you don't have to look at all of them or talk about all of them, but how do you feel like your outlook uh, helps you to be healthy in one or two of these other areas?
Well, aspirationally, I guess I could talk about a couple. I'm not sure that I've mastered them. In fact, I'm sure I haven't. But just a couple that come to mind, choice, and I'm not sure exactly what direction that conversation went, but I think making, I'm going to quote some classic rock lyrics. The band Rush, didn't they sing in one of their typically wordy songs, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice, or something like that? So like indecision is its own decision, right? And I
Yeah.
think with anxiety and with uncertainty, we can often kind of just get stuck not making a decision at all. For me, believing that I can handle being wrong, aka believing I can handle the reality of my life in which I'm wrong all the time, is believing that that I'll be all right if I'm wrong, helps me be more decisive. And I've learned that I get a lot more done and can be much more helpful to others if I, make, 9 wrong choices, then finally figure it out on the 10th one. I mean, there are some wrong choices that have really bad consequences, but a lot of them really don't. Trial and error can be a really good thing. And I'm more comfortable doing that when I am in a headspace where I'm really thinking, you know what, if I get this wrong, it won't be the end of the world. Because usually it isn't. So having an outlook that I can handle failure helps me be more decisive and actually use my agency to make choices. The other one, I guess, and maybe I'm putting my own spin on this, but environment. I can't remember who said this, but basically, like, I'm thinking about my kids, that kids don't do what you say, but they will imitate you. And I've learned that even as a music director. I remember one time I was backstage in the green room with an artist, and she was going to sing with an arrangement of her song that I'd made for string quartet. And long story short, like, she had to kind of sing it a very certain way because the other musicians were reading the notes. They weren't going to be able to follow her. She hadn't done it before. She's amazing, but she was understandably nervous. And I realized if I tell her, don't be nervous, then she'll think, oh, he thinks I'm nervous. He thinks I'm going to mess this up. Sometimes when you tell someone, like, don't trip, then they
Right,
trip.
right.
But I realized, like, the best thing I could do is just not be nervous. Like, and I just realized, you know what? I think she's going to be great. And even if she messes up, I mess up. We all mess up all the time. No big deal. So almost by changing my own attitude, like, that affected her positively. And I see that with my kids all the time. I can tell them to do X, Y, and Z, but they're going to watch what I'm doing. And that more than anything will kind of set the tone. What my wife and I, how we're approaching things, we'll tell them, how to approach things. We never told them to be super anxious about the coronavirus, for example.
Yeah.
But they could see that we were worried.
Right.
The first time after, we're vaccinated, the first time we went to some friend's house, we said, we're going to go over to their house. We're going to play. You guys can play inside. And they were like, without masks? And we're like, yeah. They're like, so we're just pretending the virus is over? That's what they said. One time I forgot my mask and I was going down the elevator. Someone got on, and then I was going back up to get it. And my daughter, who was 6 at the time, said to the guy, don't think my dad doesn't take the virus seriously. He just forgot his mask. And this is, we don't tell them how to do. They just noticed. People just pick up things. It's like it's in the atmosphere. So, and the only way to really create a positive atmosphere for your colleagues at work or your family is to it has to be genuine. It kind of can't be faked. And that's where, I guess, it might sound simple, but it's kind of, whether I'm doing my morning pages, from the artist's way, or prayer and meditation, whatever I need to do to just be in the best space I can be, which is never a perfect space, but whatever the best space I can be in on any given day, that more than anything else is going to contribute to the environment that my kids live in. And I really appreciate when other people do that for me. You know, when
Mm,
they're calm, when I'm not, that creates an environment that really helps much more than any instructions that people give me or that I give others. Is
right.
just the reality of their life positively affects me. And I hope I
Hmm.
can do that to some degree for my kids.
That's great. Thank you so much, Nick. This has been good. This has been fun for me. It's been enjoyable to hear your words about Outlook and to in hearing you to myself like develop just in these moments I have been able to develop a different way of thinking about scenarios, about my own outlook and the effects thereof. And so thank you.
Well,
Um,
thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking to you. I hope this is helpful to others, but this has been a blast for me anyway. So
awesome.
thank you for having me.
Well, folks, this has been day 7, and I want to encourage you, if you haven't already commented in the comments, be sure to do that so that I can record your attendance. Because at the end of these 8 days, which is tomorrow, I will be making sure to look at who's been here and all that good stuff, and then I'll be able to send you a prize, a gift. One of the gifts that I would love to share with one of you is our textbook. As you know, we've been using this book. There it is, Creation Health, God's 8 Principles for Living Life to the Fullest. And these conversations have been based on these 8 principles. Excuse me. And I would love, if you're somebody who didn't actually register and get this in the mail, I would love to gift it to you. And so be sure to comment, be sure to let me know that you're here from day to day. And I hope that you will tune in for tomorrow, our last day. Because of last night's internet issues, which again, I apologize for, Richard and I weren't able to finish our conversation on interpersonal relationships. And so tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we're going to have that conversation once again. And I think it'll be even better than it was. Uh, but as a result of that being at 2, I realize that some of you may not be able to tune in at 2. That's totally fine. Please just check whether you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube or Periscope. Be sure to check for the recording so that you can check in that way and so that you can get the full conversation. All right. Thanks again for joining us. I hope, I pray truly that your outlook will be one that serves you well and serves the people around you well. And be sure, if you have the book, to look at the end of the chapter at those skill building exercises, really training your mind to think healthfully and helpfully about Outlook. We will see you tomorrow.